This is the Haulin Assets podcast, where we show you how to start and run your own trucking company. Ever wanted to go out on your own? Follow Chris as he goes through the highs and lows of running on his own authority.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Haulin Assets podcast. This is episode number 156, where we're going to be talking about May 2024 financials. I am your host, Craig. Over there, he's Chris. How's it going, Chris?
It's going really well. I feel like this episode's already kicking off really well. Before we started recording, you already dropped the "that's what she said" joke, so it's going to be a good episode.
Hey, Chris, what happens before the episode stays before the episode, unless I choose to cut it out and put it after the episode.
There you go.
All right, Chris, you are ready to talk financials, and I know this because you're looking bronzed and unhealthy, and like you just got off of a nice vacation in Hawaii. Right?
I did a little vacation in Hawaii, and so I went straight into a week with the military, which was more outside than I usually get. So yeah, between the two, I've had a lot of sun in the last couple of weeks.
No kidding. Yeah, and I'm sure the military tried to exercise the vacation food demons out of you, right?
Yeah, always.
Well, welcome back. We're going to talk financials today. I do want to remind everybody before we do that to go to haulinassetsllc.com for full show notes. Go to especially motorcarrierhq.com. I need to change my intro, Chris. I need to change it to welcome to Haulin Assets, brought to you by motorcarrierhq.com, just so that people remember every single time.
That has a ring to it.
Right?
I kind of like it.
Okay, well, maybe I will. Okay, you heard it here first, folks. Peek behind the curtains. All right, so motorcarrierhq.com, that's where you're going to get tools, tips, tricks, people that can help you make that jump from employee driver to owner operator and beyond, Chris.
Far beyond.
So, all right. You were telling me that one of the things we're going to talk about today is having a truck sit for an entire month. Do you want to kind of set this up so that before we get to the numbers, people kind of understand what was going on this month and why, we often talk about trucks sitting here and there, but why is this month a little more interesting or special than other times we talk about it?
Well, we had one truck basically sit for the entire month trying to hire a new driver for it. Hiring's always a little bit of a challenge, but this one just seems like a little bit of a perfect storm. We got with 3 different people all the way to like basically offering them a job. Something happened either on our end or their end that made it so we kind of had to start over again. So this truck's been sitting a little longer than normal, and definitely a lot longer than we like. And then we also had another truck that was in the shop it actually kind of probably spanned part of May and part of June, basically 2 weeks, getting some work done on it. And, so what I want to be able to do, and we're going to talk a little bit about this when we get into the net income piece, is how having a truck sit like that in a fleet has an impact on net income, because it's, if you think about how it impacts revenue versus how it impacts net income, it's actually a pretty big difference. So we're going to kind of dive into that a little bit. It's kind of interesting. So
it sounds like basically we're going to have a month of numbers where we get to look at a little cleaner version of that truck sitting. So, like you say, better case study for the numbers. Okay, so we'll get there for a minute. You also mentioned that you've been doing some more load analysis lately, which is one of those things. I mean, you have to do it if you're an owner-operator, and if you're managing a fleet of 11 trucks, it becomes even more imperative, I would assume.
I think it's important no matter what you are. One truck owner-operator, to a large fleet, you kind of need to look at a regular basis on the routes that you're doing. For most trucking companies, you're gonna, even one that's ours that we don't have a whole lot of like dedicated lanes, we still do, we may go out to the same receiver a lot on a regular basis, so you do get some repetition there. And the lanes and the rates and everything that happens, they change, somewhat significantly every year and multiple times a year. There's different factors that cause that. It could be something as simple as seasonality, or it could be a change in your a shipper that you get, like a new customer, or just a variety of things. And so you need to kind of look at that on a regular basis, just so you can tell if a route's still profitable, what are your most profitable routes? Like you may want to, look at your 2 or 3 most underperforming things that you do and just drop those and try to find something better.
Yeah.
And so as I've done this, I've kind of noticed that there's a pretty good range from, what is traditionally kind of our best areas that we operate in versus our worst areas.
Okay. So is that something that you think we'll address more in the future, this load analysis? Are you still working on that? Or
Yeah, I think it'll be a podcast episode in the not too distant future. I'll kind of really more dive into, show you how I do it and what I look for and things like that.
Okay. All right. Well, Chris, should we get into the numbers?
I actually have one more little thing, and this is kind of a teaser into the numbers. As I was going through that load analysis, I kind of noticed our all-in rate was a little bit better than normal, and it was kind of interesting to see like what the difference is between our that highest best paying route versus the lowest one, and where it compares or where it sits compared to the rest of the, or how it compares to our all-in rate. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and talk a little bit about the market, changes in the market.
Okay. Yeah. It's we've been saying for months and months and months, let's hope that there are some changes in the market soon, right? So, okay, well, let's get into the numbers then. With 10 trucks running out of 11, and we'll get back to that in a minute. So with 10 trucks running, how many miles total were run?
So total was 109,840, which is really kind of our lowest since last September. It was slightly lower than last month, just a little bit, but definitely lower.
Okay. And of those, how many were Deadhead miles?
7,578, which is about 6.9%. And one caveat I want to put with this is, we've talked a little bit about how we've changed to a different TMS several months ago. As I'm kind of understanding the TMS a little bit better and looking at things, I don't have 100% confidence that the TMS is tracking our Deadhead miles perfectly well. I've noticed some inaccuracies in it, and so when I've calculate this number, I'm trying to go in and fix anything that I see that's inaccurate. I need to kind of get to the bottom of what's causing the problems when it messes up to see if we can avoid them and get something a little bit more accurate. I know that may not be the exact perfect number, but it's not that far off.
Okay, so all right, close enough for, well, I was going to say jazz, but I played jazz, Chris. That doesn't count. Close enough for government work, he says to the military man. All right, so that gives us a total revenue then of how much?
$239,743.84. And for the number of miles that we ran, it's really not that bad, and you're going to kind of see that when we talk a little bit about the all-in rate.
Okay, well, let's talk about the all-in rate. What did you see this month?
$2.18. So we're moving in the right direction. This is 3 months in a row where we've seen increases, and really that's honestly what we're looking for. And I'm starting to feel like things are starting to change a little bit in the market. I'm probably more optimistic now than I have been in a really, really long time that rates are changing. That optimism is cautious. Like I definitely am not confident that, the market's changing, but it's feeling better. If you look at kind of where we were last year at this time, I'm seeing an upward trend this year, where last year I wasn't seeing an upward trend. But the tall tale sign is going to come June and July. If you remember right, those were two of our worst months ever, were last June and July. And so let's see what happens this year. If we're able to kind of stay in the black and that all-in rate at the minimums keeps steady or doesn't fluctuate too much,
right?
It maybe even goes up a little bit. Especially if it goes up a little bit, I'm going to be happy as can be.
And not to give away the farm, because I know we're going to talk about this in a moment, but with that all-in rate per mile, with a truck sitting, my understanding is you are counting the fixed costs of that truck, the insurance payments, the financing payments that you're making on that truck, but you don't have the variable costs like your driver pay, the fuel, the maintenance and repairs, that sort of thing. So that goes into that all-in rate per mile. Am I understanding that number right?
Yeah. Well, everything goes into the all-in rate per mile.
Right.
Yeah.
For the whole company.
For the whole company.
Okay.
So all the fixed costs, and if you think about it, and this is what we'll talk a little bit more, if we drove 0 miles, we'd still have to pay
Exactly.
interest on the bank loans. We'd still have to pay the same amount in insurance. All these things, those wouldn't fluctuate at all. And so that's why their fixed costs are there no matter how many miles. If you run a bajillion miles or if you run 0 miles, that cost is going to stay the same.
Okay. All right. So with that rate per mile then of $2.18 over, what was it? 109, 209,000 over 109,000 miles gives us a profit loss of?
It gave us another profit, just a little one, $4,688.82. It's a decrease, unfortunately, from last month. I was hoping we'd double and double and double and double. So this ends our doubling streak. But it does continue our streak of operating in the black, which is really good. And so I'm happy about that. And again, like I said, if we can continue to operate in the black in June and July of this year, which we had really significant losses last June and July, that's going to be a win.
Is that June and July, is that cyclical for the entire industry? Is it summer vacations and just kind of everything slowing down a little bit until school starts up, kind of that sort of thing?
That has a lot to do with it. And especially here in Utah, with our specific client, they start to run out of product late spring, early summer in Utah, and don't get replenished from harvests until August, September.
What do you ship out of Utah? A lot of onions, wheat,
and potatoes.
Potatoes?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
So the potatoes are more Idaho.
Right.
The onions are more
Utah. All right. Well, it's no Walla Walla, Chris, okay? As somebody who has driven through Walla Walla, Washington many times, I'll tell you the smell certain times of the year is incredible.
Yeah. Yep.
If you like onions, or it's incredible in a different way if you don't. All right. So let's talk about the sitting truck then, Chris, and how this all factors in and why you say this is a really good case study that you wanted to talk more about in this episode.
Okay, so let's kind of look at revenue first. If you think about it, our 10 trucks that were on the road running averaged about 11,000 miles.
Which is great.
For the month, which is right where we want them to be. At $2.18 a mile, that brings in about $24,000 in revenue. And so
per truck.
Per truck. So if we would have had 11 trucks running instead of the roughly $240,000 in revenue, we would have had $264,000 in revenue. So that one truck would account for roughly a 9% increase in revenue if it had run and we'd gotten the $2.18 a mile for it. So a 9% increase, not huge.
Well, but that makes perfect sense. I mean, mathematically, the 11th truck, 9%. Yep. Okay, great.
Right in line with that. But because, like we'd mentioned before, in those 10 trucks and the $4,000 plus in net income that we got, or the $240,000 in revenue, all of those fixed costs were already covered.
Right.
So that net income reflects 100% payment of those fixed costs. So let's kind of take a step back now and look at how that one truck sitting would have an impact on our net income. And the way that I figured this out is, if you remember right, when I did our load analysis, or our cost per mile analysis back in March, and our variable cost was $1.50 a mile.
Right.
So that's a difference of 68 cents a mile between what we collected in revenue this month versus what our variable cost is of $1.50. So $2.18 minus $1.50 is 68 cents a mile.
And that's the fixed cost. So that's the variable.
So it's not our variable. That is essentially what would go to our bottom line. That 68 cents a mile is what would go to our bottom line. Because since essentially fixed costs are all covered, all we're paying for is our variable costs, maintenance on the truck, fuel, driver pay, those kind of things, tolls, all those variable costs. So that means normally our total cost is $1.87 a mile, but because the fixed costs were all covered, all at that point with that 11th truck, it's all gravy, right? It's just all we're subtracting is the variable costs. So we're essentially earning 68 cents to our bottom line a mile on that 11th truck. So that would calculate to 68 cents a mile times 11,000 miles is roughly $7,500.
Okay.
So we only earned
that's the line that people need to remember. I'm sure there are a lot of eyes glazed over as
I go
going through all
numbers.
these numbers. But no, so the bottom line is then if that truck had been running, then it would have hit the bottom line for an additional, what'd you say?
$7,500.
Yeah, $7,500. So it would have gone from the 4,000 and some odd to over 10 grand.
Yeah, so it would have essentially gone from roughly $4,500 in net income to a little over $12,000 in net income.
Right.
And so that's we looked at the increase in revenue was what again?
As what the increase in revenue?
Percentage wise?
9%.
9%.
Yep.
It's 160% increase in our net income.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you look at the initial number and you go, well, hey, it's only 9%. We're going to be fine. But then you crunch the numbers and you go, oh, crap. We can't have a truck like that sit for that long very often or we're screwed.
Yeah, it makes a big impact. You think about, one truck out of our 10 sitting, not a big deal. But that one truck is really where all the profit comes from because, it's all the essentially fixed costs are covered in those first 9 or 10 trucks. And so that 10th and 11th truck is where all the income comes from.
So this is actually reminding me of kind of the earlier days of the podcast when you were running solo, say for that first year, and then, you brought on a driver in sometime in year 2, right? But with one truck, you would often talk about, hey, we need to get to this number of miles, as long as our cost per mile or rate per mile is at X, we need to get to this number of miles, and then everything after that is going to be our profit. But we have to do this minimum to stay in the black, right? And now we're seeing that scale up to 11 trucks where you're crunching the numbers and saying, okay, so as a fleet, we've got to do X, and then everything on top of that is gravy, as you say. And I imagine that this would hold true if you've got a 10,000 truck fleet, then those first 9,500 trucks or whatever, whatever the number might be, though that first huge chunk is like, hey, this is keeping us in the black. But if we have too many trucks sitting, right, does it scale like that same way?
That's a great point. And maybe I can, with the next podcast, we could do an intro on this. I don't think it necessarily deserves a full episode, but I can calculate essentially roughly where that break even point is. If we get this X number of miles, we'll break even. We won't make a profit. We won't lose any money. That's our break even point. So then the miles above that is where the gravy comes from. And so instead of looking at it like in this analysis where I kind of looked at it more from a truck basis, we can look at it from a mileage basis and realize how many miles we need to break even, and then realize that every mile that we can get above that is much of those miles are going straight to our bottom line.
Right. Yeah. I mean, barring deer in the road or whatever. Right. Yeah. So, okay. Interesting. Good. Anything else on that particular topic that you want to hit, or do you want to get into some profit and loss stuff?
Yeah, let's go ahead and get into the profit and loss stuff.
Okay. So any highlights from this one that you want to pull out?
Just a few of the expenses. There were 5 payrolls this last in May, which this is one of the, I think maybe last time we're getting a little bit of a trend in that we're actually making a profit on the months when there's 5 payrolls, which is a good thing. So, if you remember right, that's about a $20,000 swing when there's a 5th payroll. So that's good. Another thing that I've noticed, and I spent a little bit of time last month trying to figure out exactly why this is, but our tolls keep going up, and not just by little amounts, like a lot.
Really?
Yeah, and I don't know what's causing that to happen. When I did the analysis a month or so ago, I couldn't really put my finger on it, but it has gone up fairly significantly again. So I need to look at it again and see why is this happening.
Okay. Do you have any hypotheses, Chris, that you want to lay down a marker on so that we can come back and make fun of you later for it?
The only thing I can think of is like I-80 back east has a lot of tolls. And we travel that area quite a bit.
What you're telling me is I-80 is the worst, no matter where you are, just in different ways.
Just in different ways. Yeah, it is. That's a good point.
The wind in Wyoming, the sun in Nevada, the tolls back east, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Go on.
I-80 is rough. So my suspicion is maybe we've got drivers that are using I-80 more instead of there's some other, I won't call them country roads, but not interstates that you can take.
Don't make me sing it.
Well, doesn't I-80 go through West Virginia?
Does it?
Probably.
I'm sure it
it's
does.
kind of up in that area.
This goes through basically everything, like 35 states.
So just some of those, not interstate roads you can take that'll avoid that.
Do you think that would, the toll for a truck has got to be much, much bigger than what people might be used to with a family vehicle, right?
They are.
And so do you think it would make that much of a difference? Putting more miles on the truck, taking a little more time out of the driver's day, that sort of thing. You think it would shake out to be in your favor?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Because there are some areas where it makes total sense to pay the toll because you're gonna run fewer miles,
right?
If you're versus trying to go around it, and it makes sense to do. Other areas, not so much.
Right. Okay. All right. Makes sense. Lastly, tell me about fuel. Have we mentioned fuel yet?
We haven't mentioned fuel. So fuel was 20% or 27% of revenue, which is really getting down to more of where we want to see it.
What, 25, right?
25 is like
gold
gravy.
standard.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So we're close to it. 27 is close enough that I'm not going
to... You're not complaining.
I'm not going to squawk about fuel too much.
So what do you attribute that to? Is it that fuel prices are coming down? Is it that the card is paying off? Smarter fill-ups? What's going on?
Fuel's just coming down.
Yeah.
We've been using the card for quite a while now.
You want to remind people about where they can?
The FuelStream card.
FuelStream.
Go check out FuelStream.
Yeah.
That hasn't had a significant impact since we started using it because we've been using it for a while. So that our fuel percentage hasn't been impacted by that for about a year now.
Since you first started it. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, good. Chris, any other numbers you want to pull out then?
I think that's it.
Okay. All right. Well, that'll do it then for, what was this, May? Am I crazy? Who am I?
It is May.
What is
May
truth?
Financials.
This is, wow, May Financials.
And you're getting philosophical.
You know what it is?
I don't think I like it.
Oh, you should hear me on some of my other shows, Chris. It's nothing but philosophy all day. Oh, you'd hate it.
Yeah.
Not a spreadsheet to be seen anywhere.
How dull.
Says the guy who spent like 90 seconds just listing off a bunch of numbers until
that's fun stuff.
Until I fell down out of my chair. So we'll let that wrap up then, Chris. I'm not sure about a story because we're only we're less than 25 minutes in, but we'll see what I got for you. I do want to remind everybody before we go about listener comments. I was looking around, didn't see anything really good from the last few weeks that we wanted to answer. There has been some engagement on the Facebook page, which we definitely appreciate. But if you got any questions you want us to address, please hit us up either on Facebook, just search for Haulin Assets, or go to haulinassetssllc.com, leave a comment on one of the episodes there, one of the recent episodes, and I will find that and we will address it. And we will give you a shout out and you will feel so special. Okay? That's the plan. All right, Chris. I think we're good then on this week. I'll see you in a bit.
See you then. Man, they're really going off today.
Oh, dude. Okay. So you think the Jets are bad on this podcast. So I'm coaching my son's little league team. He's 10 years old. I've been coaching it for 3 years. Just city rec league kind of thing. And so I get new players every year. It's a lot of fun. I really like it a lot. Except that this year they've got us playing at a new set of fields. The city parks, they rotate us around. And it is right under the flight path. Just the runway as the crow flies or as the F-35 flies is a half mile away. Okay, this thing is close. And the F-22s 2 weeks ago decided that they were going to do their drills where, they come in for the landing, they're real slow, and then they hit those afterburners and just take off again. and they were doing circles for about 25 minutes. We're at a baseball game. Nobody can hear anything. You can't hear yourself think. And, forget trying to coach anybody. The pitchers can't concentrate. The batters are all distracted by these amazing F-22s going on over us. Have you ever heard an F-22?
Oh, they're loud.
My gosh. You think your typical jet is loud. These were crazy. So anyway, I spent 25 minutes with my hands over my ears while these F-22s hit their afterburners about less than a mile away from us.
You know how to avoid that?
How do I do that?
You just play your games before 9 o'clock in the morning or after 4 o'clock at night. The Air Force, they're not going to work outside of those hours.
This was 7:30 in the evening.
What are you talking about? No, I don't believe your story.
We got an email. This is months ago now, a few months ago. Finally, we got the email from Hill Air Force Base that says, we're going to be conducting night exercises between these dates. Just a friendly heads up. Sure enough, 3 a.m. Just these guys hitting it out to the desert. It was unbelievable.
Sound of Freedom.
Is that what that is?
It is.
Isn't that a movie?
Yeah, it is.
I think
it has nothing to do with the military.
Oh, that's right. Oh, okay. Yeah, I remember. Oh, that's a different story for a different day.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so all I'm saying is that if you and me and the listeners ever get tempted to feel upset about the jets flying over, just need to remember, hey, at least we're like 2 or 3 miles from the runway and not half a mile, because it really sucks.
It would be bad.
And that is a densely populated area.
The F-16s weren't that bad.
No, F-16s are okay. F-35s are loud. Those F-22s are, oh my gosh. All right, so thanks everybody for driving trucks that are, pretty loud and not jets that, make me question my sanity sometimes. All right, Chris, I'll see you next time.
See you.
And give me a level just...
How do I sound? I feel like something's wrong with my voice, but I'm not sure what it is.
Well, I mean, nothing unusual.
It feels funny.
That's what she said.
Why is she saying that, Craig?
She's talking about your voice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think we're good to go.